She told me not to come closer, but stepped forward before I could even breathe. The first time he saw her, the room seemed to shrink. Not from the walls closing in, but from the way she carried herself, like the air bent quietly around her. She was standing by the window of the cafe, light catching the edge of her hair, one hand around a cup she wasn't drinking from. Her gaze drifted somewhere beyond the street, but when it met his, even for a heartbeat, something inside him forgot how to stay still. He didn't mean to stare, but she looked like someone who had already lived through too many stories, and yet somehow wasn't done being surprised by life. That drew him in more than he wanted to admit. When she finally moved, turning, walking toward the counter, the soft click of her heels on tile was louder than it should have been. The kind of sound that made him aware of his own pulse. "Excuse me," she said, her voice calm, low, the kind that carried without effort. He stepped aside too quickly, nearly knocking his glass over. She smiled, not mockingly, just a quiet acknowledgement. It was enough to make the air between them shift. "You always this jumpy?" she asked, a hint of amusement threading through her tone. He met her eyes then, tried to match her composure, but failed. "Only when someone sneaks up on me." "I didn't sneak." Her brow lifted. "You were just somewhere else." She was right. He'd been lost in watching her reflection in the glass before she turned. And now, standing this close, he caught the faint trace of her perfume, something understated, warm, and impossible to place. He wanted to look away. He didn't. Their order came at the same time. A coincidence, but it made the moment linger. She stepped back, motioning for him to go first. He hesitated. She noticed. "Go on," she said. He reached for his drink, and for an instant, her fingers brushed his, light, accidental, but deliberate enough to make him question it for hours later. He sat across the room, pretending to read, not realizing she'd chosen the table opposite his. Every few minutes, he'd glance up, and sometimes she'd already be looking. Sometimes she wasn't. Those moments hurt more. The cafe grew quieter with the afternoon. Only the hum of the espresso machine, the low rain against the window. She adjusted her necklace when she caught him looking again. He saw it, the small movement, the slight turn of her wrist, and felt a warmth in his chest that wasn't comfortable. He wanted to speak, to ask something meaningless just to hear her voice again. But she stood before he could move, gathered her coat, slipped her phone into her bag, turned, and paused. "Don't," she said softly, eyes flicking toward him. "Don't what?" "Come closer." It wasn't a warning, more like a line she wasn't sure she wanted to draw. He froze, unsure if she was serious, until she took a step toward him. Just one, close enough for him to feel the warmth of her presence, close enough to smell rain on her sleeve. Her voice lowered, almost a whisper. Some things get harder to undo once they start. He couldn't answer. He didn't trust what might come out. Her phone buzzed, sharp, breaking the spell. She exhaled slowly, eyes flickering down to the screen, then back to him. "I should go," she said, though her body didn't move right away. When she finally turned, she left her scarf on the chair, a small, deliberate accident, and walked out into the rain. He sat there, heart caught somewhere between confusion and certainty, staring at the door she'd just closed behind her. It wasn't until the bell above it stopped ringing that he realized he was still holding his breath. He didn't see her again for a week. 7 days that felt oddly longer than they should have. The kind of time that stretches when something unfinished lingers in your mind. He found her scarf still folded in the passenger seat of his car, where he'd put it after chasing her outside that day, hoping to return. She'd already disappeared into the rain before he could even call her name. He thought about leaving it at the cafe. He didn't. It was 2 streets away from his building. He passed by it every morning on his way to work. And every time he saw the soft gray of the awning, something in his chest tightened. When she finally appeared again, it wasn't there. It was outside his apartment building. He'd just come back from a late shift, shoulders damp from another drizzle, keys halfway to the lock, when her voice came from behind him. "You kept it." He turned. She stood near the stairwell light, hair slightly tousled from the wind, an umbrella in one hand, a paper bag in the other. "Yeah," he said quietly. Didn't think mailing it would do it justice. That earned the smallest smile from her. "You live here?" He nodded. "You?" "Next building is over. I was visiting a friend." Her pause wasn't accidental. "Your neighbor, actually. My son's old roommate." It landed between them, the word son. Suddenly, The invisible line felt thicker. He ran a hand through his hair, trying to mask the flicker of realization. She must have seen it anyway. So that's why you said not to come closer, he murmured. She looked down, brushing a drop of rain from her sleeve. You're kind, but you're young, and I've already been through the parts that ruin kind people. He didn't know what to say. I didn't want to say the wrong thing. She shifted her weight, eyes flicking up again. You remind me of someone I used to know. He believed people could fix each other. Maybe they can, he said. Maybe they just make the cracks show sooner. A quiet settled, heavy but not hostile. Just real. He took a half step forward before stopping himself. You don't have to be afraid of being seen. She laughed softly, not mockingly, more like someone surprised he'd notice. I'm not afraid. I just don't like what happens after people look too long. Her tone faltered then, a whisper of something lonely. Underneath the poise. He held out the scarf. Then let me just give this back. She reached for it, and their fingers brushed again. Not accidental this time. The contact was small, almost nothing, but neither of them pulled away. Her breath hitched first. He followed. You should go inside, she said, finally taking the scarf, folding it in her hands like something fragile. I will, he said. When you do. She hesitated, just long enough to look at him properly. No masks, no practiced calm. The rain thinned around them, soft and uneven. She stepped back, then forward again, indecision written in the angle of her shoulders. Good night, she said, but it sounded like she didn't mean it yet. And before turning away, she did something he'd remember long after. She pressed her scarf against his hand again, gently, eyes meeting his, silent, conflicted, as if to say, I'm still not sure which one of us should let go first. The next time he saw her, it wasn't planned. She was sitting alone in the courtyard between their buildings. Early evening, the kind of dim light that blurs edges and softens everything. The air smelled faintly of rain again, the pavement still holding a dull sheen. He almost walked past. Almost. But she looked up just then, catching him mid-thought. You walk like someone trying not to be noticed, she said, voice quiet but steady. He smiled faintly. And you notice too much. She tilted her head, studying him. Maybe that's my problem. He sat down on the other end of the bench, leaving a careful space between them. The air, however, didn't keep its distance. They didn't talk for a while. Just the soft hum of the city behind them. Distant traffic, a dog barking, the occasional thud of a closing door. Her fingers traced the edge of her cup absently. You ever wish you could start over? He glanced at her. You mean like to erase everything? Not erase, she said. Just soften the parts that hurt. He looked at her hands, delicate, restless. The kind that gave away more than her words did. You talk like someone who's already tried. Her lips curved faintly, though her eyes didn't join the smile. And failed. Something passed between them then. Not words, not even intention. Just awareness. The quiet kind that feels both right and dangerous. He leaned slightly forward, barely perceptible, enough for her to feel it. She didn't move away. You should stop looking at me like that, she murmured. How am I looking at you? Like you don't know what happens next. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The sound of footsteps cut through the silence, coming down the path toward them. A male voice called out, casual and familiar. Mom. Her body tensed first. Then her face softened into composure faster than he thought possible. She turned slightly, her tone light but controlled. Hey, Daniel. The young man, maybe his age, maybe a year older, walked over, holding a grocery bag. Didn't think you'd be out here. Just some air, she said, the kind that hides everything in plain sight. He gave her a quick hug, barely noticing the stranger sitting a few feet away. You okay getting home? Of course, she said. When he left, the air didn't return to normal. It grew heavier. She looked at him again, her voice a whisper now. You see? That's why you shouldn't be here. He didn't move, didn't speak. Just watched the way her breath wavered. Steady, then not. I didn't know, he said softly. I know you didn't. Her fingers trembled for the first time. That makes it worse. He reached for her hand, hesitating just before contact. Then tell me to stop. She looked down, eyes flicking to where his hand hovered. Close, but not touching. Her throat tightened. You already know I won't. The wind stirred, lifting a strand of her hair across her cheek. He caught himself reaching before he could think, brushing it away gently. A small, impossible touch that changed everything. Her eyes met his, wide and unguarded. Now, their breaths synced, shallow, uneven. He leaned in, just enough for the world to disappear for a second. Then a light from the building window flickered on, cutting through the dark, forcing them both apart. Neither spoke. The silence stretched, charged and fragile. She stood slowly, eyes lingering on him like a confession she wasn't ready to voice. "Go inside," she whispered. "Before I forget why I shouldn't." He didn't move. And when she finally turned away, he noticed her hand still trembling, as if it remembered something her mind refused to. He tried to stay away. He really did. 3 days passed, long enough for reason to feel righteous, but not long enough to quiet the pull. It was Thursday night when he saw her again. Light spilled from her apartment window, soft amber, half-dimmed, like a secret trying not to be seen. Her silhouette moved behind the curtain, pacing slowly, hesitating near the window before turning away. He should have walked past, but he didn't. By the time she opened the door, she already knew it was him. Her expression wasn't surprising. It was relief tangled with regret. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice low, careful. He swallowed, hands in his pockets. "Then why did you open the door?" Her lips parted, a breath, a hesitation. "Because I hoped it wasn't you." "Liar," he said softly. Her eyes flicked up to his, and something inside her faltered. She stepped aside, barely enough space for him to pass, but he did. The room smelled faintly of rain and coffee, the kind of scent that felt lived in, personal. A record played quietly, an old song that neither of them named. She closed the door slowly, leaning against it for a moment as if the act itself had cost her something. "I thought if I kept busy," she murmured, "you'd fade." "And did I?" Her silence was enough. He took a step closer, not reckless, just deliberate. Her breath hitched once. "You're too young to know what this means," she said. "Then tell me." He whispered, "Because I can't stop trying to find out." Her hand twitched at her side, wanting to move, to stop him, to reach for him. I didn't know which. He closed the space between them until her perfume blurred into the air between their breaths. His voice softened. "Do you ever think about that night in the rain?" Her eyes lifted to his. "Every time it rains." The confession hung there, fragile, forbidden, true. He reached up, his fingers brushing a loose strand of her hair away from her face. It caught against his knuckle, static and trembling. She didn't move. "You shouldn't look at me like that," she whispered. "Then stop standing so close." Her laugh was breathless, nervous, breaking at the edges. "You don't understand how wrong this is." "Maybe," he said, "but it doesn't feel wrong." Her hand found his wrist before she could stop herself, not to push him away, just to feel something solid, real. "You'll regret this," she murmured. "Already do," he said, voice low. "And I still can't walk away." Her eyes searched for him, a quiet storm of wanting and fear. Then, so softly it nearly broke him, she said, "You sound just like him." He frowned. "Who?" "My husband." The words hit like a cold current. She stepped back, barely, her body still close enough that he could feel her warmth, her hesitation. "He used to say things like that. Before I stopped believing in him." A silence grew between them, sharp, trembling. He moved closer anyway, voice almost breaking. "Then let me remind you." Her breath caught, his face inches from hers, her hair brushing against his cheek. Her hand lifted, uncertain, trembling, resting on his chest. The record crackled. A distant thunder rolled outside. Their lips hovered a breath apart, neither ready to close the distance, neither willing to end it. "Don't," she whispered, eyes closing, voice shaking. "If you do, I won't stop you." And then, a knock at the door. They froze. Her hand fell away first, but the tremor in her fingers lingered against his shirt. The knock came again, louder this time. "Mom?" "It's me." Her eyes widened, pulse quickening. He stepped back, the moment splintering between them like glass. Everything fragile, everything half done. She turned toward the door, exhaling shakily. "Go," she mouthed, voice barely audible. But even as he moved toward the back hallway, neither of them looked away. When the door closed that night, the sound stayed with him. It wasn't loud, just final. He didn't see her for days. Not in the courtyard. Not through the window where that faint amber light used to burn at night. It was as if she'd erased herself. Then one evening, she appeared, not by accident this time. She was waiting outside his building, her scarf wrapped too tightly around her neck despite the warm weather. I need to talk, she said. Her tone wasn't angry. It was controlled, practiced, the kind people use when they're afraid they'll say too much. They ended up in his apartment, though she didn't sit down. She stood near the window, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the floor. You remember that night? She asked quietly. He almost smiled. Which one? The one you shouldn't have been here. That doesn't narrow it down either. Her lips pressed into a faint, unwilling curve before fading again. My son knows. The words hit harder than he expected. Knows what? That you've been around, she said. He saw us. That night in the courtyard. He stepped closer. Did he say anything to you? She nodded once. Asked if you were seeing someone. I told him no. Technically true. Her eyes lifted sharply, and for a moment, the tension between honesty and restraint cut the air clean. Don't make this harder than it is. I'm not the one lying, he said, quieter now. Her breath caught. Barely, but enough to make her shoulders tighten. You think I don't know what this looks like? I think, he said, taking another step, you care more about how it looks than how it feels. She turned away, brushing her fingers over the window frame, small, nervous movements betraying what her words wouldn't. I can't let him find out. He didn't answer, just stood there, close enough for the air to thicken. I told myself it was just curiosity, she whispered, something harmless. But you, me, he prompted. You don't look at me like I'm supposed to be invisible. Her confession cracked something between them, something that had been pretending to stay unspoken. He moved before he could think, slow, hesitant, until his hand found hers. Her fingers twitched once, then stayed. The silence filled with everything they weren't saying. I shouldn't be here, she said again, though her hand didn't pull away. I know. He reached up, brushing a stray hair from her face. The gesture was soft, almost reverent, but her eyes flickered, not from fear, but from something she'd been holding back too long. She exhaled shakily, words trembling. You weren't supposed to be him. His brow furrowed. Who? Her voice dropped, almost a confession. The one I thought I'd stopped waiting for. He froze, reading her face, not sure whether to move closer or run. She looked up, finally meeting his eyes. You remind me of what I wanted before I learned to pretend. Outside, thunder rolled, faint but steady, like a warning that came too late. He took a step closer anyway. Their reflections blurred together in the glass, almost touching but not quite. What if he already knows, he said. Her breath caught again, this time sharp, real. He can't. He leaned in, voice barely audible. Then why did he text me? She went still. What? He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, her son's name glowing on the screen. One message. We need to talk about my mother. Her hand trembled against her side, eyes widening as the realization hit. The air between them shifted, desire now laced with danger, everything fragile, suddenly flammable. Neither of them spoke. And for the first time, she didn't tell him not to come closer. The message on his phone burned between them, small, glowing proof that whatever they'd been pretending not to be, someone else now saw. She turned toward the window, her reflection fractured by the faint rain outside. Her hands trembled when she spoke. He knows. I can feel it. He watched her, every controlled breath, every careful pause. Then we stopped lying. She turned sharply. To who? To ourselves. Her laugh was barely a sound, more like disbelief breaking into air. You think this is simple? No, he said, stepping closer. But you keep pretending it's impossible. She shook her head, her composure slipping just enough for her voice to falter. He's my son. You were part of his world once. If he finds out, he already has. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it throbbed. She looked at him then, really looked. Her eyes softened in that painful, familiar way that came just before she pulled away. You shouldn't have answered that text. I didn't. Her brow furrowed. Then why tell me? So you'd stop pretending you don't care what happens to me. That undid her. Her breath came shallow, unsteady. She took one step toward him, not surrender, but inevitability. He didn't move. He wanted her to choose it, not fall into it. You think I haven't tried to stop this? She whispered. Every time I see you, I tell myself it's the last. Then why are you here? She hesitated, the kind of hesitation that holds truth on its tongue. Because every time I walk away, I keep hearing you say my name. He reached out, fingers brushing her wrist, just enough for her pulse to jump beneath his touch. Then stop fighting what's already happening. Her eyes fluttered closed for a second, her breath catching on the edge of his words. When she opened them again, there was no distance left to hide behind. "I don't want to hurt you," she said, voice breaking. "Then don't." He stepped closer, their bodies now inches apart. The world outside blurred, irrelevant. Her hair brushed his jaw as she looked down, whispering, "You make me feel alive again, and that terrifies me." He cupped her face gently, thumbs tracing the edge of her cheekbones. "Maybe that's what we both needed, to remember we still can." She leaned into his touch, slow, uncertain. The air between them trembled. For a heartbeat, it seemed inevitable. Their lips, the breath they shared, the quiet surrender waiting between words. But then she exhaled, stepping back just enough for his hands to fall. Her voice was calm again, though her eyes shimmered with everything she didn't say. "If I cross this line, I won't be able to cross it. Not with you. Not with him." He nodded, silent, understanding. "And if you don't?" She met his gaze, no longer deflecting, no longer hiding. "Then I'll spend the rest of my life wondering what it would have felt like." For a moment, neither spoke. The rain deepened outside, soft and relentless. He reached for her hand. She didn't pull away this time. Their fingers intertwined, quiet acceptance in the space where desire had once lived like fire. "Maybe someday," he said softly. "Maybe," she echoed. Her smile was sad, real. "But not tonight." She let go first, slowly, like something precious being placed down. At the door, she turned one last time, eyes tracing the air between them. "You were never supposed to matter this much." He almost smiled. "Neither were you." And as she disappeared into the hallway, he realized the air still smelled faintly of her. Rain, coffee, and the kind of goodbye that didn't feel like the end. The rain didn't stop for days after she left. It came and went in quiet drizzles, soft, unhurried, the kind that seeps into everything without notice. He caught himself listening for her steps in the hallway sometimes. A door opening, a voice too close to mistake for someone else's. But it stayed silent. Until one morning. He was leaving for work, coffee in hand. Keys half forgotten, when she appeared at the bottom of the stairwell. No makeup, no scarf. Just her, real, tired, and somehow lighter. "Morning," she said, like it wasn't the first word between them in weeks. "Morning," he echoed, careful not to let his voice betray the relief. They stood there for a second, neither moving. Then she smiled, small, hesitant. "You look different. Older, calmer." He almost laughed. "You disappeared." "I needed to," she said softly. "Things were too close. Too much. And now." Her eyes lifted to his. "Now it just feels real." The quiet between them wasn't heavy this time. It was full, steady. She took a breath, looking down at her hands before meeting his gaze again. "He knows," she said. "Daniel. He asked me if I cared about you." "What did you tell him?" "That I do. But not the way people think." He frowned slightly. "What does that mean?" "It means," she stepped closer, her hand brushing the edge of his sleeve, "I care about you enough to want you to live a life that isn't waiting for me to be brave." Her voice broke near the end. He reached out instinctively, resting his hand over hers. "I wasn't waiting," he said. "I was learning." She blinked, unsure. "Learning what?" "That some people don't stay because they don't love you," he said quietly. "They stay because they finally love themselves enough to stop hiding." Her eyes softened then, the kind of softness that comes after long resistance. She stepped closer until their foreheads almost touched, breath mingling, steady but trembling at the edges. He lifted a hand, brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "You still think it was a mistake?" She shook her head slowly. "No, just bad timing." He smiled, sad, warm, knowing. Maybe timing's just another excuse people make when something feels too right to explain. Her laughter came out as a breath, light, tired, beautiful. Then she leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. Neither spoke. The world outside moved quietly around them. Footsteps, distant voices, the drip of rain off the eaves. Her hand found his fingers intertwining. "If we'd met 10 years later," he said, "would you have said yes?" She smiled against his skin. "Maybe. Or maybe I'd still tell you not to come closer." He chuckled softly, and still stepped forward anyway. Her thumb brushed the back of his hand. Always. They stayed like that. Not lovers, not strangers. Just two people who'd finally stopped running from the same truth. That connection, even the impossible kind, leaves you changed forever. When she finally pulled away, it wasn't goodbye. It was something gentler, a promise without words. And as she walked toward the lights spilling through the open door, she turned once, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for reminding me what it feels like to want again." He smiled, hands in his pockets, heart steady now. "Thank you for letting me." The door closed softly behind her, not an ending, but an echo that would stay with him every quiet morning after. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next? More slow burn romances, forbidden connections, or something entirely new?